Seeing none,
Mr. President?
Yes, Mr. Stargell.
Propose this portion of the agenda, public comment.
Moved by Mr. Stargell,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Brown. All those in favor, say aye. Opposed? Thank you. Report of the board solicitor.
No, nothing like it this time, it's just something for executive.
Thank you. Report of committees.
Mr. President,
Mr. Cofer.
for members of the audience who sitting out there and see what's projected up on the screen up here, presentation of the new billboard graphic that will be out on Route 73 behind the stadium. The Public Relations Committee, and working with the superintendent over the last few months, has come up with this design. We think it's representative of the high school. It's representative of the diversity of the programs at the high school and the school system, not just the high school, but the school system. And it's representative of the diversity of our community up there. So we're very excited to finally reach this point of unveiling it, and the superintendent has assured me that everything is in place, that this will move into production and get up on the billboard as soon as possible.
Those are our students.
Yeah, oh yeah, that's right. All the students you see there are actually students from the high school. They are our students, all of them. So again, you see the diversity that we have up here in the academic achievements, the co-curricular achievements, and the mix of ethnicity that we have. So.
Mr. Cover, I'd like to thank the Public Relations Committee for their support, and also to the Pennsauken High School teachers and administrators who helped put this together, and especially to our students and parents who gave permission for us to have our students portrait. So, thank you.
I'd also just like to remind the public, I see a number of our athletic coaches here tonight. This is a week from tonight. They have a fundraiser across the street at the Savoy, Colleen, I'm sorry. So anybody that might be interested in supporting the All Sports Boosters Club, by all means, contact one of them. It supports their scholarship efforts that they give out to seniors at the end of the year. So, thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Cofer, and I thank the PR committee. It's a very nice billboard. Any other committees? Seeing none. Items for board approval.
Thank you, Mr. President. Coming before the board, items on page number 7. 1, curriculum and instruction. Items 1, 2 through 6. 7 on page 9. Items 8 through 11 are new items. Number 8, there's a word stage. Actually, rental of the stage. Number 9, students will be engaged in that activity. 10 is a school elementary at intermediate school. And 11 is another event for our middle school. On the bottom of page 9, staff travel. And then on page 10, key professional field experiences, items 13, A through M. Page 11, use of school facilities, item 14B. Number 15 on page 11 through page 15. On page 16, we have an amended resolution that was previously approved on March 21st. On page 17, student and activities, co-curricular athletics. Item number 1. A through O, P through U are new items. And then on page 19, athletics. 2, 3, 4, and 5. page 20, personnel, resignations and retirements, leaves of absences, reappointments on page 21, A through X. Change in salary, number 4, A and B. And on page 24, extra compensation, number 6. That concludes the items for board approval. Mr. President.
Thank you, Mrs. Martinez. Do I have a motion? Yes?
You give it a try? I'd like to move our superintendent's report, curriculum instruction 1 through 11. Travel, 12. Facilities, it is 13. Travel is 12 and 13, correct, Mr. President?
I believe so.
12 and 13.
13 of these professional experiences.
Oh, okay.
Okay, professional experience is 13 facilities, is 14 and 15. 14, 15 facilities, and as we move through, others, which is 16, student activities, which is 1 through 5, personnel is 1 through 80U, 4, which is change of salaries, which is 4, A and B transfers, which is A, extra compensation, which is 6. That is the motion.
Heard the name.
Second.
Made by Mr. Starkey, seconded by Mr. Wayne. Questions?
I have a quick question.
Just on-
Page, fine, whatever. This is my mom.
We'll get there eventually.
Page 9, number 12, the professional development. Last week we rescinded initially A, which was, I guess, just offered for one person. It was said that one of our current professionals was going to come in and offer this training for, I'm sorry, page 9, number 12.
Yes.
We're going to come in and offer this training for all of the administrators, but it looks like here it's just the same program, but now it's being offered to all administrators.
Very cost effective, yes.
Okay. So it was more cost effective to go the original way than to switch it.
When we looked at the items and we looked at the opportunities and the cost, we have a cost savings here if we added everybody else.
Okay,
Travel.
great, thanks.
Mr. President?
Yes, Mr. Wayne.
I just call some reminder, on the item 15, start with page 11. If any computer will be maintaining or still record personnel, making sure cleaner will always given it away.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Just a reminder. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Colquitt,
Yes.
Dr. Maloney,
Yes,
Mr. Nguyen,
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien,
Yes.
Mr. Rodriguez,
Yes.
Mr. Sargent,
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt,
Yes.
Mr. Brown.
I'd like to recuse myself on the section for appointments, item number 3T, and yes to the rest.
Item 3T.
3T.
like to present the section for business and finance. The section was presented at the work session. There was no items added to the list. So I would like to move under business and finance, numbers 1 through 8. And I did research number 8, which was the question whether or not that was a homeless student, and the reason why I was so taken aback because the documents that I had in front of me showed that the parents were Pennsauken. And it confused me when I saw the Southampton, when both parents had addresses in Pennsauken. So when I went back, the child is placed outside of his home, and he's being placed at the school in Pennsylvania per his IEP. And he's a senior. That's what the confusion was. So I would like to move items 1 through 8 under this section for approval.
Mr. President?
Yes,
I'd like to move items 1 through 8 for business and finance report.
That was easier, huh?
Very much.
Moved by Mr. Stargill, seconded by Mr. Nguyen. Questions? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Dr. Maloney?
On number 2, I'm recusing myself on the bill list where Rutgers University is mentioned, and on the March food services, yes to the remainder.
Mr. Nguyen?
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. Rodriguez?
Yes.
Mr. Stargill?
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Colvin?
On item 2, on the April bill list, I'm accusing myself on all safe and lot under 1070. And on the March food services bill list, AA pretzel, yes to the remainder of all items.
Thank you.
Okay. Public comment. Pennsauken Township Board of Education recognizes the schools are the concern of all members of the community. With this in mind, the Board of Education welcomes and solicits input from the public. During the regular monthly business meeting, members of the community are afforded an opportunity to express their views. It does, however, respectfully suggest that citizens attempt to resolve concerns by speaking directly to school administrators before bringing it to the board. Individuals with a relevant interest in the functions or duties of the board are invited to speak a maximum of 5 minutes on any one issue. You are required to give your name and address before speaking.
Mr. President, we haven't done new business or old business yet.
Oh, I'm sorry. I skipped right over that. Sorry, hold that thought. Back to page 26. Report of new business. Thank you, Mr. Brown. New business. Old business.
Mr. President, I have something for old business.
Yes, Mr. O'Brien.
Thank you. The budget process for the Pennsauken School District is the most important annual duty of the school board and the administration. Our budget is the document that determines the educational programs of our district. It is our vision and our written guide. The budget is 100% about children, from maintenance of our school buildings to our school buses to our classrooms. Since 1993, I have helped develop school district budgets. Our 2013-2014 Pennsauken School District budget stands out as the worst budget process I have been involved with. The following are reasons for my concern. During the first 2 budget meetings held in February, the administration did not know the number of employees in the district. The chaos was not limited to the grand total of employees. The total of most of the subgroups of employees in the district, for example, kindergarten teachers, first grade teachers, special education teachers, was not known. At the third budget meeting on the 4th of March, the administration informed the board that they found 31 positions that were not included in the February budget meetings. To my dismay, the Board of Education rubber-stamped this chaotic budget process, forwarding the budget to the county superintendent. Now the budget process got even more chaotic. Around 4 o'clock on the 21st of March, I received a call telling me that the county superintendent had rejected our budget. The Pennsauken School Board was ordered to raise taxes, the maximum 2%, and cut positions. Also, the Pennsauken School Board was directed by the county superintendent to comply with our orders within 24 hours. My understanding of state statute is that the county superintendent cannot order a school board to raise property taxes or cut staff. Therefore, at the meeting that night, I pointed out how unprecedented this was and asked if we had it in writing. The superintendent of Pennsauken Schools, Mrs. Martinez, informed the board that we had the county superintendent's order in writing. I asked to see it and was told by Mrs. Martinez that she would get me a copy. Without seeing the order in writing, the board decided to vote on raising the taxes to maximum 2% and to cut the following staff. 7 high school teachers, 2 middle school teachers, 2 secretaries, 2 educational assistants, 1 to 2 administrators, 1 maintenance employee. This is 15 or 16 valuable members of our staff. Dr. Meloni and Mr. Nguyen both joined me and voted no. The vote on the tax increase and the staff reduction passed 6-3. The Pennsauken district is a district in need of improvement. We have children at risk. At-risk students need more help, not less. Staff cuts will hurt our students and our district. The public hearing was the following Thursday, the 28th of March. I brought up that I had not seen the county superintendent's order in writing. Mrs. Martinez apologized and said that she would get it to the board. The same 6 board members without seeing the order in writing voted to pass the budget with the 2% tax increase and 15 to 16 staff cuts. The next day, the Pennsauken Board of Education received an email from Mrs. Martinez, and I'm going to read the email now. It says, "Board members, as I said I would, below is the email sent from the county office that was also shared and responded to in collaboration with the board president, respectively Maryland." And the email was from Ann Volk. Peggy and I have talked about your fund balance issue, and we are not willing to approve your budget.
Excuse me, Mr. O'Brien.
No, I have the floor. I have the floor.
Mr. O'Brien, Board of Order. Point of order. The attorney wants to speak.
The documents from the county is not proper to introduce that document.
Let him speak.
It's a document that was emailed. It's a public record document.
What are you hiding?
The reason why.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Furley. But since I did read the doc, I did read it, and it was emailed to me, I can state quite clearly that it was not order from the county superintendent to raise taxes or cut staff. It wasn't even from the county superintendent. The property tax levy for the 2013-2014 school year has been certified. It may not change. Property taxes will increase 2%. I have brought my budget process concerns today to the Board of Education, the administration, and the public so that we may do what is best for our children. I formally request that the board schedule a special meeting the first week of May and direct administration to present a budget that saves these 16 valuable staff positions. Thank you.
Mr. O'Brien, it's nice that you play to your audience, but you seem to have left out a lot of interesting facts. The 31 positions that you say that were lost or found or whatever, it was explained that the reason for that was that there was brand new software installed. The county superintendent never said that we must comply within 24 hours. The county superintendent, and you received that phone call from me, and I told you exactly what the conversation was that I had with the county superintendent. We are a district in need of improvement. The only other problem is that we do have a limit to how much money that we can spend. We cannot keep spending money and keep positions when we have the county superintendent telling us that our enrollment has gone down over the last 5 years, but we have not reduced staff. She does have the authority not to approve our budgets. And also the process in which the budget was presented to us, and since 1995, you got me by 2 years. This is one of the best processes I've ever seen. It's been the most open. I think the biggest problem that we had with the process was actually all the questions that you asked about positions that were cut in 2-3 years ago, and we had people chasing them for weeks. You know, chasing ghost positions that were never there to begin with. So, I mean, you know, it works both ways. I'm not happy that we had to increase the tax burden on Pennsauken taxpayers, and I'm not happy at all. I'm never happy that when we have to reduce staff. We tried to do it in a way that would have the least effect on the students, and like you said, 6 people agreed, 3 people disagreed. That's what happens when people come together. Anyone else?
Yeah, Mr. President, if I may.
Yes, Mr. Starr.
I heard the applause. And you heard what you want to hear. So you will automatically think that that's the gospel. But I'm telling you, as somebody who sits in the same seat that you sit in every day. And I'm telling you, what you just heard is a falsehood. That gentleman that just made that presentation was president of the board last year, when we knew that these elements were going to come and they were going to have to be dealt with. There's a Title 18A and there's a Title 6A. Take a look at it. It gives you the regulations and it governs districts. We don't have the authority to do what we want or push money around where we want to push it. it belongs to the students. And there are regulations and governance in that process. So you can sit here, and I'm telling you as someone who performs the same duties that you perform every day in a very challenging district. And if there was any validity to that, I would be supporting that. But there's no validity to that. Just remember, these things were not created overnight. Budgetary issues are trying in all districts. There are decisions that have to be made. So wherever you're getting your information from, I'm telling you from somebody who sits in the same seat that you sit in every day and is actively involved in bargaining in a neighboring district. I'm telling you firsthand, it's not easy to get a budget. We don't have the leverage to do what we want and how we feel that we want to do. So I hope that you look up the resources and assess what you heard. Because I'm not telling you from what I want you to hear. I'm telling you what reality is. And what you heard is not reality. That's a falsehood. There are things in budgetary issues now that are amended, policies changed. DOE can give you direction. And the gentleman that just gave you that presentation that you all applauded about was the president of the board and used a contingency fund to smoke screen and push forward and supported the fact that we were going to dissolve our reserves. You cannot move forward. You cannot move forward when you diminish your reserves. So you think about who you're clapping for up here, because that's what you want to hear. Do the research. We're doing the best we can. We don't want to see anybody losing their jobs. But there's certain things that we cannot do. There are laws and governance that we have to follow. And there are people that we have to answer to. So what you heard, be careful. Be careful, because I'm speaking from the same bargaining position that you are. So be careful.
Mr. President?
Yes, Mr. Brown.
You guys, I'm a bit appalled by the statements I just heard from Mr. O'Brien. We have to keep in mind, over the past few years, this district has lost over $7 million in state aid for this district, and we still haven't reduced any staff. We're trying to make our ends meet. We've had a lot of issues, and I'm offended that Mr. O'Brien can attack the superintendent and the business administrator in the manner in which he has, when they've gone above and beyond to find out items that we had no clue about that had been going on for years. These items are not new to us, but they brought these items to light and made us all aware of what was going on. So I'd like to applaud them for their efforts in trying to straighten out issues that have been in the district for years that no one knew about.
Mr. President, if I may.
I told.
I'm sorry, I didn't see you.
That's
Go
okay.
ahead. I'd like to respond, and I fortunately or unfortunately walked in the middle of the presentation. You know, I think this board has been painted as an enemy of teachers, and that's disheartening because I too sit as place of an educator on this board, and I have children in this district. And what I can tell you about this board is that they have attempted over the last couple of years to cover the teachers more than I've seen any other board, and I work for the Department of Education, and I will make that public, in the region. You know, the situation that this board was presented with is one that there have been many districts that laid off teachers and did not cover those positions years ago. This district did not. Reduction in money, new laws and regulations coming in, actually using up our reserve to make sure that those jobs were protected. This board was presented with an end of our vote, which meant that our budget was not going to be authorized. And yet, Mr. O'Brien, the county superintendent does redline and stop budgets all the time when they see us spending our reserve. all of our reserves were exhausted in an attempt to not reduce jobs. It was not going to pass. The directives that we got were the ones in which we were willing to follow because we understood we had to be able to pass a budget. There is nobody more than me that does not want to see anybody lose their job, especially when I do know the job that you perform, and I do know the needs that these students have that are necessary for your presence in the classroom. But we do have a large reduction in our enrollment, and we have class sizes that are rivaling a lot of private schools in this district, which are wonderful, but are not sustainable in a period when everybody else is looking at dollars and cents, and they're looking at pushing people to 28, 26, 20, 30 people in a classroom. That is not the reality that we would like to have here, and we're doing our best to preserve every job here. You know, I too want to echo and really applaud the administration and the staff for what they did with this budget. I don't think that we can even quantify the amount of mess that they cleaned up. And I'm disheartened that we're seeming to want to blame it on the cleanup crew, except minus the crew that actually made the mistakes. The budget that we submitted last year was a shadow budget. And I'm going to make that clear. We submitted the same budget 2 years in a row with jobs on a control roster that were not there. No one had bothered to go back in to find out who was in those jobs. And then when we get to the budget process, unfortunately, our old board president, who was the one who submitted that budget, then wants to quantify and blame the superintendent and administration as if they're inept. It was not their ineptness. It was their cleanup that we actually saw manifested in our budget period. The questions, the clarifications were necessary. We were attempting to be able to move forward. But to smear them now and to act like they were the ones that presented something that was irregular, something that was inept, something that was incomplete, is a falsehood. What had happened is that it had never before been cleaned up, and we had a new administration in hand that was able, as Mr. Sargent said, to be able to uncover a lot of things that should have been done many, many years ago. It's unfortunate that this has been positioned in a way that we look divided and look as though we're against the teachers and look as though we're trying to raise taxes. I live here too. No one wants their taxes raised. We understand the necessity in regards to kids, but we also understand that this district hasn't raised taxes for a number of years. A number of years. Which is why we're in the situation we are in. You can't not raise taxes, have the bills escalate the way they are, keep all the staff, use all of the reserve without it hitting the dead end. And we all understand that. And that's where we are. Every effort will be made and every effort is made to try to preserve everyone's employment. Because this is a community and we understand the importance that you are to our kids. But we're in the situation in which we're in and we're trying to work through it. Not as enemies of our teachers, the number one people on the front line with our kids. We're working alongside of you and as hard as we can for you. It's not our position to sit here and try to act like we don't care. We do. This is a hard road, and this is not a position that I take lightly, and this is absolutely not what I would have liked to see as my first budget in this role as vice president. But this is the reality in which we're in, and we're doing our best. So I too am disheartened by what the presentation that was made. And, we can present whatever we want to present, but the truth is the truth. And it cannot be spun for the benefit of playing to the crowd. Thank you.
Dr. Meloni.
I wanted to just follow up on a couple of points that I heard here this evening. Number one, there is validity to what Mr. O'Brien said. There are these cuts in the budget. There are a 2% tax increase. That will happen. That's not something imaginary. It's happening. My problem with the issue of the budget and why I voted no before to it is because we never looked at another option. We went and were told, apparently, and the board president did inform all board members of this, that the county superintendent was in fact telling us what we had to do with our money. I know I haven't been on the board that long, but I never had heard of a county superintendent doing such a thing, mandating exactly where the cuts had to come from, instead of allowing the school district, the administration, to look for where the cuts would be least difficult or least impactful in the district. We were at the end of our rope. That's true. And this shadow budget that I did hear some response about, that was true too. But that was presented by the superintendent and the business administrator last year. So if there was an issue with it last year, it should have been raised last year. County superintendent also signed off on that budget that we brought to her last year. And all board members agreed on that budget last year. So maybe it was a shadow, if that's what we're finding out. I understand that. But you know, we all approved that. We knew what we were doing when we were taking monies out. The county superintendent knew what we were doing and said, that's okay. And never said a mention of, well, you have to worry about next year. You never know what's going to happen next year. Every effort was not made here, and that's what I was concerned about, and that's why I voted no to this. I believe there are other cuts that could be made, and that reductions in staff do not necessarily have to be made in this district. That being said, I wanted to make a motion to entertain having a meeting in May, a special meeting, that is going to perhaps look at maybe some other places that we could cut so that we don't have to lay off any teachers or secretaries or maintenance individuals. We're educational assistants. All of you, every single one of you is an educator. Okay, so that's what I would like to see happen. So I'm making that motion.
There's a motion on the floor by Dr. Meloni, seconded by Mr. Nguyen, to have a...
President?
Yes, Mr. Story.
Okay, now we'll just finish the
Yeah, okay. Motion and a second to have to call a special meeting as dated in May to look at the budget.
To look at the budget, review the cuts,
Review the cuts.
with the potential of not laying off our staff members.
Mr. Starkey,
Yes.
you wanted to say something?
Yes, I do. What's your recommendation tonight, Mr. Meloni, while we have everybody here, in terms of where you might want the board to explore? I'd like to talk about it now.
I would have to go back and relook at the budget, which is what I'm proposing to do at this special
But you
meeting.
mentioned 3 areas there that you would not like to touch. So therefore, you did a process of elimination. So what's left? Where would you like to go with your, with your formula for cutting? Since you named the 3 areas, you named teachers and 2 other areas. You named...
No, I need no staff reductions.
No staff reduction.
And I
So
think there are
you've
other
already
areas
eliminated no
where we
staff.
could look.
You've already eliminated no staff reduction. So where else would you like to look at?
I would have to re-look at the budget to see where the other reductions could be made. As I said, we did not spend every effort in re-looking at and looking at that budget
Would
initially.
you like to discuss it tonight?
No, that's why I made a motion to have this special meeting.
I'd like to talk about it right now.
Well, that's not the motion that I made.
It's just the motion is just...
I understand what the motion was,
I
but,
agree too.
what I'm trying to bring to light is that we want to entertain a meeting, but we don't know what we want to talk about. Well, we can sit here tonight and make accusations of where we want to look. So my question is very simple. It's not something that you don't have to be a scientist to understand. You obviously have given it some thought because you've already made preamble recommendations with your process here. So what I'm asking you to do is give us a slight bigger portrait in terms of where you might want the board to look at in terms of making these cuts.
As I said, the motion that I am making is to have a meeting to look over the budget once again put every effort into looking over the budget to find any other alternative to reducing staff that will not impact our students.
Well, what you just
That's
mentioned,
what
what
I
you
think.
eliminated, Ms. Maloney, you have left it up to start taking money from the kids.
No, that's not what I said. In fact,
All right, well, let's stay germane to the motion, which is talking about whether we want to have a meeting in order to have a meeting in May in order to review the cuts that we made in the budget. Anyone else wish to speak on the motion?
Mr. President?
Yes, Mr. Williams.
I listen actively and carefully about everybody, make a point. So I'm not in position to pinpoint, who do what when. My real concern is because, the step downsizing, it will cause me a great deal of concern because we look at class size average, yes. Pennsauken School District really like with state average. But, we don't want our staff, our kids to become redundant. I want to take into consideration about 4 later interpretation about redundant. For years, while recognizing, superintendent also administrated really good intent and effort to balance your budget and also promoting about student achievement. But by downside staff in this particular year, it needs to be really not well justified. First, our district for years, namely our Pennsauken High School, stand for a great effort. We spend tremendous resources, kids, students, everybody. We try to turn our school around. And our community, particularly really hard-working community, yes, our kids need tremendous help. Any help from teachers, staff will be wonderful. And I do hope that translates improving our student achievement. Good staff is not a good job. And I do believe, speak as a parent, yes, I feel more fortunate because I find a little time on my kids. But many parents in our community don't have that luxury. They work 2 jobs, 3 jobs. So pretty much education you receive from classroom. Downside staff, that means we cut directly and we withdraw money spending our kids in classroom. So I don't see any other way around. That's why in line with Dr. Meloni, we just implore the central office to come, review, and hopefully identify any potential areas. You can reallocate it and hopefully we save it our staff. That's all I want to say tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Wade. On the motion, anybody else?
Yes, Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. Rodriguez.
Unfortunately, this motion is brought to the table, I guess, before the balance of the board members had a chance to respond to Mr. O'Brien's letter or presentation. I believe that perhaps this motion should be suspended until the balance of the members speak regarding the presentation. However, if it doesn't please the board, I could address my comments towards the motion. I find the motion is too focused and one-sided and does not address all of the problems that exist with the budget process. It does not consider other very important matters that really affect our children and the quality of education. Saving teachers' positions just for the sake of saving positions does not necessarily address the betterment of our children. I think that we're missing many other important things that affect our children. Quality of education, quality and condition of our facilities, and many, many more. Transportation. So if this motion is only focused on retaining positions, then I would have no choice but to vote no for this motion. I believe the process, if I go back to the presentation made, if I may, I know I'm deviating from the motion's response, but I think there are problems with the budget process, and I agree partially with Mr. O'Brien that there are some mechanical issues that are problems with how we go about this process. Perhaps the superintendent does have the right to question or stop our budget process, and that's for legal counsel or for an attorney to advise us on that matter. But I strongly disagree on the process that we took this year. I believe that our business administrator, Celeste Ricketts, and our superintendent did a very good job in not only cleaning up, organizing, correcting, and focusing the budget process as best as they could within the time they had. They spent probably 60 to 70% cleaning up house and the balance of their time to try to put a budget together. I have to remind everyone that what Dr. Meloni said was true. We all participated as a board approving this budget in the past. So Mr. O'Brien's presentation really was an attack on all of us and not the superintendent or the business administrator. And perhaps we've rubber-stamped the budget in the past and the process we did. But I applaud the superintendent and the business administrator to say no mas to this process and wanted to correct it. Unfortunately, it's painful and it has some serious consequences. Instead of attacking the process and the personnel involved, I never heard any recommendations from the attackers or the critics. So our role is also to guide this administration on recommendations on how we improve this process and how we can maybe find other ways of saving staff. But we never heard that. I believe that the process ignores certain things, like transportation, which I think we have problems. I don't think that assigning or using capital reserves to balance a budget, whether it was a shadow budget or not, to me is rather irresponsible, because it is your savings account. It's your backup. It's in case something happens, what do we use? And that's what it's for. And it neglects capital money, neglects our capital assets, and that's our schools. And it doesn't matter whether we have two teachers or 4 teachers, but if we have sick buildings, poor buildings, unsafe buildings, what does that say about us for our children? And I think that the past budgets never recognized our facilities. I think that the comments presented today really were negative, and I think changes the focus of what this board should be doing. And that is to be working cohesively and together to try to arrive at a good budget that can be approved by not only county, but us and the community. I am, as I'm very upset. I'm very disturbed to hear that this is coming from one of our board members. And I just wish that perhaps that be reconsidered and really make a better presentation and a better presence to the community. I feel very uncomfortable being in front of a group of citizens here that feel that we are neglecting our duties and acting capriciously and approving a budget without any sensitivity or awareness towards teachers or students. I think the community and this audience should really reconsider the applause and perhaps get more involved in this budget process. I sat 2 Saturday mornings and I saw perhaps 4 people in the audience. And to have this multitude of people here criticizing the process and us, to me, is disheartening. So I welcome all of you. If we do have this meeting, come on out to the meeting so that you hear and see clearly the mess we were in and the efforts administration is trying to do to clean it up so that perhaps 2 years from now or a year from now, whatever, we can say that we're on good ground moving forward. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. Anyone else? So there is a motion and a second.
Mr. President, can we amend the motion? We must vote on this motion first.
Then the amendment would take precedent of the motion.
I'd like to make a motion that we amend this motion, that it is not restricted specifically to just looking at jobs, but it is that we are able to identify and perhaps look at where there might be some room for some additional cuts, and let the process guide us, open-ended. I agree with Mr. Rodriguez. If we are going to have this meeting, it needs to not be restricted, because the budget will detail what we can do.
But, Mr. President?
Well, there's a motion, but there isn't a second for the amendment.
I would second the amendment.
There is a motion for an amendment that if we do have this meeting, that meeting be called, it would amend the original motion to say that the meeting be called for a date in May that would look at the budget as a whole, and it be an open-ended process, and not just to review the positions that were cut. Is that?
Yes.
You agree, Mr. Coven?
Yeah.
Okay.
Questions, President?
Yes, Mr. Coven.
Look to either the superintendent or the business administrator. Were we to have this meeting and be open-ended, what is the process for amending the current budget? It's been submitted, it's been approved. What's the process if we identify areas where there might be changes?
You don't have to amend the budget. What I think the process will take us to is, I think with those positions, I think it totaled like $1 million. We will try to find whatever that dollar it was to fund the budget for those positions and health benefits. We'll find those dollars in other areas. I think this is where I'm understanding this process is going to take us. The overall dollar amount for the budget is going to remain the same. We're just going to look at other areas to fill that gap.
On the amendment, I mean, I was, as president, I was in a few meetings with the superintendent and the business administrator, especially the day after we got the notice from the county superintendent, and we were trying to find other areas but to find that amount of money, it is very difficult without, you know, paper and pens and pencils. It's a lot. Staff is usually the only place that you could find that amount of money. The only other kind of things that we saw it impacting was extracurricular activities like sports, marching band, and some of the instructional programs and the credit recovery programs and things like that that we would have to move back on. Yeah, very draconian cuts. And believe me, when I was talking to the county superintendent, I tried everything. I did try, you know, Mr. Rodriguez said earlier, the capital reserve. It wasn't the capital reserve, it was the reserve account, our general reserve that we were short. We did have some money in the capital reserve, but they wouldn't let us move it over. It's just for capital projects. To tell you the truth, I certainly don't mind meeting to talk about this, but I don't think that it's going to come to fruition where we're going to find $1 million, you know, under a rock somewhere and be able to save all these positions. I know that, you know, if, every dollar saved is something that is a good thing, but I'm telling you, we kind of scrubbed that budget a couple of times. I mean, you know, it was mentioned that we had a shadow budget last year and no one said anything. I mean, I remember the superintendent coming to us and telling us that basically that is exactly what we had, and that to get into the position that we needed to be in, it was mentioned that we should cut 9 positions last year and increase the tax to 2%, and we didn't pay attention to the superintendent. And now this is kind of like, this is the second year of that coming down the hill. So, I mean, let's, is there anyone else want to speak on the amendment? We have to vote on the amendment first. Oh, we don't have a second on the amendment. No, Mr. Copeland second. Right, Mr. Copeland second.
Mr. President?
Yes, Mr. Starkey.
I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of the way that the leadership and the board has scrubbed the process in terms of what the town budget is made up. Again, I mean, what are we looking to specifically do? Because we've done it already. So where are we going at this point? I'd like to open that question up to anybody. We've done this already, and Mr. Rodriguez brought out an excellent point. We scheduled the budget process and the budget meetings, and no one showed up. And everybody here on the board took part in formulating the budget. So I don't know where this meeting would go. So we've already had these meetings.
Mr. President?
Yes, Mr. Brown.
I would not be in favor of this motion, and my reason for that is having this motion to me appears to suggest that our first thought was to just immediately eliminate staff, which that was the furthest thing from our minds when we were creating this budget. As a matter of fact, that was when last year when we were making the budget and the superintendent came to us with budget cuts, we shot it down because we didn't want anybody to get laid off last year. And now we're faced with that predicament again. And I think we went through this thoroughly enough the first time that we're not going to get to where we think we need to be or where we're trying to go just by having this meeting. I kind of see it turning into let's beat up on the superintendent and the business administrator meeting more so than anything else. So I would not be in favor of supporting this motion.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Anyone else? Okay, we'll ask for roll call on the amendment, which is to not restrict it to just jobs, to be an open-ended review of the spending plan. I'm not even going to say budget, just the spending.
Mr. President, could you just repeat the amendment?
The original amendment, well, this amendment is to not restrict the original amendment to be just for jobs, for it to be an open-ended review of the spending plan. The meeting, yeah. Well, the original. Roll call, please.
Mr. O'Brien,
Pass.
Mr. Rodriguez,
Pass.
Mr. Sargent,
Pass.
Come on, guys.
Ms. James Wilson,
No.
Mr. McDevitt,
Ms. McDevitt, no.
Mr. Brown,
No.
Mr. Colford,
Yes.
Dr. Maloney,
Yes.
Mr. Nguyen,
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien,
Yes.
Mr. Rodriguez,
Yes.
Mr. Sargent,
No.
All right, so the new motion is that the board call special meeting in May to review the spending plan, not just for jobs, you know, to review the spending plan. I don't know how you want
The motion would be that we call a special meeting in May to review review the budget so that we might find out if we can get to the budgetary amount by looking at other programs. I guess that's right, because the bottom line, the dollar amount has to stay the same. No, it's not without a balance, yes. So we
Review the budget for
review the
cuts.
budget for cuts.
to review the budget for cut, for possible. Dr. Maloney, do you agree with that massaging of your motion? Okay. On the amended motion, is there any comment?
Sorry, can you repeat that amended motion?
Be a special, for the board to call a special meeting in May to review the budget for possible cuts.
I have a comment on that. I do have a
Mr. Brown, are you all right with that?
I'm fine
Is that what you need?
I guess that my comment is that I think I will agree that we have scrubbed this budget. We have looked, and we're starting to talk about even our educational policies and our educational enrichment programs for our kids. And we've cut them draconianly already. And I think that there is somewhat of an ideology that if we are to have this meeting, that this board did not go through this policy already and did not look very closely at what we were doing, and that we have, as a board, had to make a very hard decision, one that none of us wanted to make. But to reintroduce this process means, to me, does stipulate and say that we did not take our position, our responsibility seriously the first time. There are hard cuts that need to be made and hard decisions when you take on this role. So if we're going to be reinvestigating our decisions and second guessing them, I don't know if I'm in agreement with that.
Thank you. I would agree with your comments that I will not be in favor of this motion because of the exact same reasons. The board did go over everything. We did make a decision. We were confident in the decision for the people that voted yes. I mean, I would be voting no. Anyone else on the amended motion?
Yes, Mr.
Mr.
President.
Rodriguez.
I agree with Vice President and Mr. Brown that it's not good or to present an appearance that we're second-guessing ourselves or that we didn't really appropriately or adequately look at the budget process and did a good job. But in good spirit, good mind, and openness, I would be willing to come back and sit and talk about ways to perhaps improve certain issues or concerns the community had, and to verify, in fact, that we did do a good job. So I would be willing to do that. I do want to stress to everyone that I believe we did a good job, and I feel comfortable that the budget that we're going to come back with will be very close. There may be some changes. We might find that rock that you were talking about, Mr. President. But I would be open for the meeting to explore opportunities.
Thank you. Anyone else on the amended motion?
Mr. President?
Yes, Mr. Cook.
Yeah, I would agree with Mr. Rodriguez's eloquent comments. I think, it was a grueling process, an arduous process, and I too commend the business administrator and superintendent and the effort they did in bringing that forward and cleaning up things that were uncovered. We had a business administrator that started the first of the year. We had new software that was installed throughout the department, not just the control roster, but the financial packages that were installed and so forth. If you want to use the term, kind of the perfect storm that we faced at the time. I agree with the comments about, whether it demonstrates a lack of responsibility by re-looking at it. But I agree with Mr. Rodriguez's comments in the interest of transparency and openness and concern for our students. That I would be willing to have a meeting. Not saying that the outcome would be any different than what we have right now, but I would be willing to have a meeting. And I think that, we owe it to the folks out here. We owe it to the students. Let's not forget the students. We talk about the students all the time, but they are our job. They are our responsibility. Their education. We honored students tonight. In my comments, I said these students are representative of all the students in the district. So we owe it to all those students. And if we can look at the budget and we can massage things and move things around, or maybe some of these positions are saved, and that makes a difference for one child, I think we owe it to the students to do that. So there are my comments on the motion. I'd like to speak after the voters taking on this motion, Mr. President.
All right, Mr. Cook, thank you very much. Anyone else on the amended motion? Seeing none, roll call.
Mr. Rodriguez? Mr. Rodriguez?
Yes.
Mr. Starcher?
No.
Ms. James Wilson? Mr. McDevitt?
No.
Mr. Brown?
No.
Mr. Colbert?
Yes.
Dr. Maloney?
Yes.
Mr. Nguyen?
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
I will email the board for possible dates in May, probably, hopefully within the first 2 weeks.
I just want to thank my fellow board members.
Mr. Copeland, you wanted to speak?
Yes, I do. Last year was a very difficult year. I think O'Brien's lack of leadership that he provided through the previous year. Had there been more cooperation between Mr. O'Brien and the superintendent and the staff, I don't know that we would have reached the same outcome that we did this year. There was a demonstrated animosity by Mr. O'Brien towards the superintendent. And I feel that this continued attack on her is using this issue of the budget and the cuts just to perpetuate this dislike for the superintendent. There were 9 board members who voted to bring the superintendent on board. We all worked through that process together.